Coming at you from Bellingham, Washington. This is Two Nuts in the Sack. I'm Julie.
I'm Gavin. Warning, warning. This episode is going to be fun
And epic.
and epic. Before we get started, though, it is time for a small but important course correction. In yesterday's episode about King Tut, I over and over again repeated myself using the term BC, which I want to correct now because I do know in my caveman brain that it is now referred to as BCE, which is before the Common Era, as opposed to the archaic before Christ. So I just wanted to tell you all that yes, I do know the difference, but I also still believe that Pluto is a planet. So I just came before that age. That was before my Common Era. Also, when I touched on the Illuminati and versus the Curse of Tutankhamun, I do know these things, but I chose not to delve into them so deeply because our already 10-minute podcast would have turned into a 10-hour podcast. But George Herbert's money was tied with his marriage to Almina Wombel, who was the illegitimate daughter of Alfred de Rothschild of the Rothschild family. If you know any of your Illuminati history, you know that the Rothschild are deeply tied into that. So take off your tinfoil hat for a minute and just realize that I didn't want to go down that particular rabbit hole when I was talking about the death of George Herbert's. And secondly, when Rothschild gave the couple £500,000, don't think of that in today's pounds. Think of that in back in the day. So if you follow today's inflation rate, which goes up about 3% every year, the amount of money that Alfred Rothschild gave to George Herbert was £500,000. Well, today that is worth more than about $13 million. Aside from paying off all of his debts. So he was free and clear and had $13 million to spend. So that is why he could pay this dude to go down and dig in Egypt to find more treasure that he would ultimately make more money off of. But his death could have been caused by either the Curse of Tutankhamun or the Illuminati.
Dun dun dun.
Just because maybe some of the things that he uncovered had more implication. Dun dun dun. But that was our course correction for yesterday. But today we're going to go so far from this. We are going to go way into the future. We are going into
the final frontier.
That's correct. The world that Gene Roddenberry came up with, Star Trek. Take us away, babe.
Well, Star Trek. Let's talk about Star Trek. One of my favorite episodes is Mirror Mirror. It's when they go into an alternate dimension and their personalities are complete opposites. It's so awesome. Do you remember the episode, Gavin?
I do remember that episode. That was where they were beamed down to a planet trying to broker a deal with a civilization that was based on dilithium crystals. And they use their powers to keep themselves safe and power their own technology. But dilithium crystals are also what power the warp core on the Starship Enterprise.
Wow, you're such a nerd.
Just wait.
It's kind of hot.
I know. You married me for a reason.
I did.
I tickle all your smart spots.
Yes, you do.
So, in that, they beam down to the surface, and when there's terrible electrical storms around the planet, and when they beam back up, they're not themselves, and the original landing party is beamed into an alternate universe, and they find themselves on a ship where the Klingon Empire has taken over the Federation. And so everything is very cutthroat and profit driven, which is so much further from where they from when they went down to the planet. But alternately, their doppelgangers go back to the Enterprise, where Mr. Spock, being the most logical being in the universe, quarantines them and puts them into the brig because he knows that there's something not quite right. But Kirk and his team are left in this alternate reality to figure out how to get themselves back.
All right.
Am I on the right track with
You're
that one?
exactly spot on.
Okay.
This brings us to my other favorite episode is The Trouble with Tribbles. Oh my gosh, those furry little suckers that multiply like bunnies that everybody wants and Klingons hate.
Because tribbles bring like joy and happiness to whoever holds them.
They like purr like kittens.
And multiply like rabbits.
I said that already.
But I love that. I just love that scene when Kirk opens the bulkhead and it's like raining gerbils on him. I mean, it was tribbles, but it just looked like guinea pigs or gerbils just raining upon him. These little pulsing,
fuzzballs,
chirping little fuzzballs.
All right.
So, I mean, okay, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I mean, we got to like talk about like Star Trek is like it's had its own journey, ups and downs. Like, because right now we're talking about original Star Trek, but that's not the Star Trek that we grew up with.
Right. But it's a classic and it's loved and treasured. Because it's the beginning.
Well, yeah, and it had Kirk and it had Spock and it had Uhura and it had Scotty. I mean, goddamn, how many times have you said "beam me up, Scotty" in your life?
I'm like, beam me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life here.
I saw that Facebook post. Yes. It was adorable. But this has just been like a universe that's existed for over 50 years. And there's been so many iterations of it. I mean, first off, you had Star Trek, the original series. Then there was Star Trek, an animated series, which I vaguely remember, but I remember watching it in the 90s and not realizing that it was just a clever remastering of cartoons from the 60s. Because the animated series ran in 1968, 1967, and 1968. And it had 22 episodes. And the Star Trek, the original series, ran from 66 to 69. So
I believe
it's
they had 3 seasons, correct?
exactly that was and that's what like is so amazing to me, that this just captured the imagination of the country and the world, that 3 seasons of a TV show just blew up into an entire universe of its own. And because like from there was not much heard about Star Trek until actually another one of our favorites, Star Wars. So Star Wars,
And they both talk about light speed.
exactly. It's a saga of sorts, and Paramount chose to chose to kind of cash in on the on the moneymaker that was Star Wars, and make their own space saga. So they also introduced a movie. But what that did was reinvigorate public interest in Star Wars or in Star Trek as a saga of sorts. So you had this thing that went from 66 to 69, and you had an animated series that was 68 to 69, and it just sort of went dormant until Space Fever caught with Star Wars, and they blew back up with Star Trek. And so, but each has just created their own mythos, because honestly, the universe is so vast and so complicated that it definitely could fit these two stories into it. So, all right. So we have there was literally 7 series created from Star Trek from birth to now. There's been 13 movies from then to now. So let's go into our favorites again. Sorry. We talked about Mirror Mirror, which was a great episode. But I just felt that we needed a little bit of backstory just to cement everything. So, where are we at now? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. That was an aside.
All right.
Let's get back on track to where we were going.
There was Amok Time, which is has Khan in it. They introduced Khan, and which he has a race of superior people, and they end up frozen in space. Do you recall that episode?
That wasn't Amok Time.
That wasn't Amok Time? Oh, am I wrong on that? Which one was that?
No, that was the movie.
Oh, right.
Amok Time was the episode that they harkened back to in a really old movie in today's standards. Came out in, oh good god, I want to say like 1995-ish, We should look that up at some point, and we'll put it in course corrections. But no, Amok Time was the episode, or Amok, and it's Amok. Like, remember
Amok.
from,
Okay, making
yeah,
amok. Got
remember
it.
from Hocus Pocus?
Yes,
Amok, amok,
amok,
amok,
amok,
amok,
amok.
amok,
Got
amok,
it.
amok. But anyhow, so Amok Time was that episode where Spock went freaking nutter butters because he was going through like Vulcan's second puberty, wherein it was time now for him to get married. So they went to Vulcan. He went against all reason from the captain and from the doctor and everything. He was just acting irrational, which is weird for Spock. But it was basically because he was like, now's the time when I have to get married. So I have to go back to Vulcan to go meet this chick that I was betrothed to.
Now, is that the one where he fought Captain Kirk?
Yeah.
And Captain Kirk almost dies?
Exactly.
Okay.
It was, and then, but that was the Jim Carrey and Matthew Broderick thing where he was like, this is just like that episode of Star Trek when Spock had to fight Kirk, and it was like,
Do you
That was
remember?
my favorite part.
Okay,
I'm
do you
sorry.
remember that episode when there's the Gorn lizard that Captain Kirk has to fight and like kicks its ass?
That is another favorite episode of mine.
What's that one called?
I honestly don't know. I
Oh,
mean,
we're
like,
terrible.
seriously. Well, I mean, okay. In my defense, I love classic rock, but I cannot remember the names of songs and or bands.
That's
Even
where I
though I'm
come
like,
in.
I know that. Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly where I come in.
Yeah. We try and quiz each other, and you win and I lose every time. If we're like listening to a classic rock station, you'll turn to me and be like, who's this? I'm like, I don't know. I can sing this song, but I don't know who it is. And you're like, oh yeah, it's it's Whitesnake. Here I go. And I'm like, how the F do you know these things? But with these episodes that were part of like my formative years, I have no idea what the names of them were. Like Mirror Mirror, I remember that one, but only because they did another version of this in the next Star Trek series that was super popular. So why don't we move to that one? Because that was more within our formative years.
Yes, Star Trek.
Sorry for that, folks. You don't realize it, but we do, and we think about these things. But we were just about to talk about TNG. What is that, sweetheart?
The Next Generation.
Indeed. What's your favorite episode?
I love the first episode with Q and Captain Picard, and Q is totally playing God.
That's right. He held Captain Picard and the crew of the Enterprise responsible for all of the atrocities of mankind, and thus deciding whether or not mankind should be erased from existence or allowed to exist.
He's one of those villains that you just can't help but love.
Yeah, well, honestly, that's John Delancey.
He is so funny.
He's charismatic as F. But, and it's just an enigmatic, charismatic character is always going to be a winner, because you're going to have people on both sides of that. And that is what the Q was. He was part of the continuum, I guess they called it. But
I actually went to a Star Trek convention when I was 10 years old, and I got Okay, thank you, Gavin. I got John Delancey's signature. He's a very tall man.
At what kind of convention?
A Star Trek convention?
That's correct. But
You're such a
that's
snob.
awesome. No, I'm
Snob.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep you YouTube haters away. So at least I know that one of us knows how to pronounce it correctly. But this is I mean, honestly, this is a topic that you and I both love so much. I wouldn't tolerate YouTube haters on this one.
Right.
So, but John Delancey is amazing. And when I was a kid, I went to 3 different Star Trek conventions, and I got to meet Michael Dorn. Who was Michael Dorn?
Worf.
I got to meet Marina Sirtis. Who's Marina Sirtis?
Deanna Troi.
And I got to meet Gates McFadden.
The Doctor.
Dr. Beverly
The Crusher. Sorry, brain fart.
Whose son was
Wesley.
That's
Crusher.
correct.
Wesley Crusher.
So
kind of a nerd.
I know. That's why I married you, because honestly,
I meant he's a nerd. You're both nerds.
Well, he was. Did you know that Will Wheaton was a college roommate of Chris Hardwick?
I did not know that.
Yeah, and Chris Hardwick is the founder of the Nerdist podcast.
Oh, that is so cool!
Yeah.
I did not know this.
Yeah, no, it's people out there, you got to look this up. There was a famous debate between Will Wheaton and Chris Hardwick. Although you could call him Chris Hardwick because he does a bunch of shit. He also took a bunch of shit recently. It was a Me Too thing that was from way back, but forget about that. We're talking about nerd shit right now.
Yes.
So no, but yeah, they had a big argument about whether it was GIF or GIF. Like when you see like a little video file and you see the .gif.
It's totally GIF.
It's technically GIF.
What, like Jiffy peanut butter?
Which didn't exist. Alternate realities, Mandela effect.
I know. Damn Mandela.
Okay, so back to Star Trek. All right, where are we at?
The Borg episode, the very first one. Where they're introduced.
Okay, do you have the name of that written down somewhere?
I do not.
You do not?
I do not. I'm sorry.
All right, because I mean there was a lot of Borg stuff on there because they're just so crazy.
Well,
it's a hive mind, like android, but more robot than people because their minds get changed and they basically just become a part of the collective, as it's called. And
you will be assimilated.
Exactly. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated.
I love that line.
That's fucking terrifying.
Remember
it's like, hey, dude, wait, no, I can help you out. There's a bunch of dudes over there. Oh my god, now I'm a Borg.
Well, they're always
that's fucking terrifying.
They're always trying to meet new races and like create peace. And there's no reasoning with the Borg whatsoever.
Well, yeah, and and the Borg is just trying to meet new races and just make them Borg. I mean, honestly, if you look at it from that objective point of view, like where you just remove yourself from the situation, the Borg are pretty much the same as Starfleet, except instead of being like, hey man, we come in peace, they're like, hey man, you're one of us. literally. And they just like take all their technology by like assimilating that civilization.
Well, remember when they assimilated Picard? Oh my gosh, it was my biggest nightmare. I'm like, oh my god, please don't do that.
Seriously, Locutus.
Don't do that.
But that was another thing. Like that was he became I am Locutus of Borg. He didn't get a number designation like most other Borgs.
He was an individual.
7 of 9 from, we'll get to this.
Yeah.
From Voyager. But he didn't get a number designation like that. He got a name designation of Locutus, which became very important in the plot line of another movie. We'll get to those, as the Borg Queen knew that he was special. His mind, his passion, his body was special. And that was what like kind of made the whole thing very surreal. Like I remember watching those episodes as a child and just realizing that there was like I was dumbfounded that Jean-Luc Picard is now a member of the Borg. How in the F are they going to get him out of such a big pile of S? Because I was a child when I had these realizations.
All right, let's moving on. I really love that episode, Brothers, where Data gets that chip installed.
That's right. And that was kind of it was one of those ones that was, you could see where it was like, it was scary for the captain, because Data, like, who had kind of become his trusted friend, now just showed his true power, where he was able to just like take over the Enterprise from like tip to tail, and he had everybody sequestered from the bridge.
What was his brother's name again?
Lore.
That's right, Lore.
Right. But so Data was able to basically hijack the Enterprise and go back to the home planet where he was born, quote unquote. And he was called by Noonien Soong, who was the scientist that brought him to life. And the reason that Soong called him back was to give him basic emotions, because that was something that Data always wanted, was something that he could feel what other people felt. And so Noonien Soong kind of sent him out as a prototype. As advanced as he was still just a prototype. And so he sent out this signal which called to Data, which made Data ignore all of his duties and go to the planet that Soong was living on. I don't remember the name of the planet. And go and basically seek out his father, because his father like put out a recall notice, and Data was hardwired to receive that notice. But unfortunately, Data's brother also received the same notice and came back as well. And so you had Data and his brother Lore, and they both showed up, and Lore gave his father like a sleeping potion and turned off Data, and then switched clothes with Data so that he would become Data, and Soong would give him the emotional chip as well. It was kind of a this very psychedelic episode. But that so basically it ended up as Data now has the chip because he was able to defeat Lore with the help of his dad, Noonien Sung. And the thing about this episode that like it sort of always tripped me up was that Khan, and and this goes to the movies again. We'll get to this later, but Khan was Khan Noonien Singh, which just was a mind bender for me. Like doing the research for this episode, I kept seeing Noonien, and I'm like, I know that Noonien Sung is Data's dad or Data's creator, but then I kept seeing Noonien pop up in in several different movies, and I was just like, am I going crazy here? But no, his name was Noonien Sung, and he was the creator of Data, and he also created Lore, but he created Lore after Data, but Lore had sort of imperfections, which he eventually sent Lore away because Lore was never the same robot that Data was, because Data was actually curious and Data was actually a good robot.
Well, Data,
And
his main passion and dream was to be human. That's what he wanted more than anything.
right, and that's why he joined Starfleet, which all these things are tied up neatly in a bow in this package of an episode. But it was a good episode, and ultimately it was about brothers' forgiveness, because the episode started with two brothers who were playing an April Fool's joke on each other, and one almost killed the other. Which,
True sibling rivalry.
yeah, but that was because the other brother was in a place where the only thing that he had to eat was the sour fruit, which ultimately could have killed him. And it was Dr. Crusher who was like, well, it was just a joke. It went badly, but brothers will be brothers. And Data sort of took that to heart because he realized at the end of the episode that his brother had pulled this trick on their father and taken the emotion chip because he was being a little bit selfish and just wanted to be like his big brother. And it's convoluted, but that's Star Trek for you.
Right.
But ultimately, brothers will be brothers. The big brother's always going to pick on the little brother, and they still love each other. And that was the realization that Data had at the end of that episode.
Okay. Moving on. Next is Deep Space Nine. I am not real familiar with Deep Space Nine. I didn't watch it very much. I do remember Worf falling in love in the 6th season, that whole thing. Do you remember that, Gavin?
Yes, I do. Like Deep Space Nine was one that, it was right at the tail end of Next Generation, and it included Worf, but then it introduced a whole new host of characters, and many of those characters were very interesting. I mean, like, they brought back Quark, which was a character from the Next Generation. He was the Ferengi, and on Deep Space Nine, or let's just call it DS9. So Quark was an interesting character. He's a Ferengi. He comes from, I don't know where the fucking Ferengi come from.
I don't know either.
Neither do I. All they know is that they're like dicks, and all they want is money. But anyhow,
Do you remember that perverted episode where they made Deanna Troy and Riker get naked?
well, that was from the
That's from the Next Generation. I'm just saying, I just remembered that with the Ferengi. It's sidetrack. Okay, keep
well,
going.
yeah, and the Ferengi's big thing was like stroking their ears, and that like really got them off.
Yes.
Anyhow, so there's the Ferengi for you, just in a nutshell. Dicks like their ears rubbed. Awesome. Anyhow, he was like a bartender, which is kind of funny because honestly, like it just proves that even in space, alcohol is good business. But so there was him, and there was Jadzia Dax, and that was the woman that ultimately caught Worf's heart, because they got married. But Jadzia Dax was interesting in and of herself, because she was a vessel for a symbiote, and she held all of the knowledge of the Dax civilization, and that got very convoluted. Ultimately, like, this one, as interesting as it was, they brought back Worf. They brought back, what was his name? The engineer,
Oh,
Miles.
yes.
But anyhow, so they brought back some key characters from, but definitely secondary characters from the Next Generation, and then they built an arc upon that, and they used a lot of the alien civilizations that were discovered in TNG to sort of populate their space station, and that space station was responsible as a Federation outpost that was the protector of the only known, at the time, the only known stable wormhole that went from, I don't remember where it came from, but I know that it went to the Gamma Quadrant. And so there was, but because of that, there was conflict between the planet that was closest to the space station, which was Bajor, where the Bajorans came from, which is where the security officer, her name was